So it's the last episode of Takopi's Original Sin. Hey, it's Romania Black. I was in a really good mood today. So today's a really good day. I was actually going to watch something else. And then I got home. I got to get off work a little bit early today. I think that's what helped. And I got home and I was going to watch something else. And then I sat down and went, I'm in a really good mood. What if I just went ahead and watched the final episode of Takopi's Original Sin. And so that's what we're doing today. I have a couple comments I want to talk about before we dive into this episode. But otherwise, thank you all so much for joining me on this little jaunt of a journey. It's weird that we're on episode 6 and it's already the end. That's bizarre to me. It's also kind of weird. I thought about it in that earlier this year, I watched Gunbuster, which came out in the late 80s. And was also a 6-episode series that was encapsulated within 6 episodes. And I really, really enjoyed Gunbuster. I did not know if I would like Gunbuster going into it, and I really enjoyed it a lot by the end. So you can make a good series in 6 episodes. And I believe, and I'm being very truthful when I say this, I believe Gunbuster and Takopi's Original Sins is both an example of having a short amount of time and being able to accomplish a lot in that amount of time, which is great. I don't want it to get twisted based on the last 2 episodes, but I really do like this series. I really like the characters. I think that they are all very, very well depicted of different forms of trauma. I think this series is very important because a lot of people in this world have gone through these same traumas that these characters have experienced. And I've had several people in the comments come out and say that they've experienced these traumas. They know what they're like. I myself am included amongst you. And so I feel like this series does a very good job of presenting these traumas and showing just how important being a good parent is, but also just how important being a good influence in someone's life is. These characters, with the exception of Ozma and Junia back in episode 4, these characters don't really have a lot of stability around them, and these characters don't have a positive influence. And there are many people in our own lives that are in the exact same position. They don't have a positive influence around them. Their home life is shit. They deal with a lot of things involving having to make ends meet. This world can get very complicated and very ugly very quickly. And when you're young, especially like 9 years old, it doesn't seem like there's any hope, or there doesn't seem to be any help. So it's important that we as people, as humans, become that source of hope. And all that is, and all that involves, because some people may be like, I don't want to get involved in their life, or I don't have money to do this. It's just being nice. It's just being supportive. It's just giving someone a smile and being courteous. Like that seems like it shouldn't be too hard, but surprisingly, in this day and age, can seem that way. So I want to talk about 2 comments before we dive into this final episode, and then we'll go from there. This one that is from Sudeep Biswas, 2764, as I'm passing this toy to Huckleberry and tossing it to him because he has no sympathy for my plight of watching this. He'll calm down in a minute. There's 2 parts to their comment. I want to address each part in batches. The first says there's a bit of nuance about Marina's mom, which I think you missed as it goes by really fast and it's hard to catch. Also, because I'm not from Japan. And it says her mom is heavily implied to be a staunch old school conservative. Now, conservatism is different in every country to different degrees. There are definitions to it. There are terminologies that go along with it. It can be very cultural or it can be universal. So I feel like this kind of rides both lines. It says, if you notice the news, she's watching on her phone about some COVID with some anti-vaccination propaganda about them being useless and fear-mongering around a new variant being in iguanas of all animals. I don't think that's a sign of her being conservative. You could say that the anti-vaccination part is. I'm from the US. Usually if you're really, really conservative, some of them are anti-vaccination. Not all, some. I know conservatives that get vaccinations all the time. But also, I feel like I also know people who are liberal that also would buy into the COVID variants and all of that. So I personally don't believe that that's a sign of her being conservative, but that's what their comment pointed out. They also said, this is the part that I was like, oh, okay. The kombucha drink she likes is typically considered an old granny drink in Japan, which is weird as she's not that old. This could show that she's had a very conservative and traditional upbringing, or she could just like something old. I feel like some people can like things that are old. It's not necessarily an age thing. So she could be very old school and have some inherent patriarchy in her as well. Again, I feel that this comment is also assuming and drawing it from projections. So we can't quite say, yes, this is what it is, because I like the Beatles and I was a baby when half of them died. So, you know, I feel like we can't make assumptions. That's one thing too. We can't project, but we can't make assumptions. The other part of their comment said, secondly, about the part when you mentioned the sinister look of Shizuka and her seduction in the park. If you watch that scene again, Shizuka shows no romantic feelings for Ozma at first. She just talks to him normally. I don't know your gender or sex, but I'm just going to use the girl as metaphorical because it's fun to say it that way. Girl, she's been showing no romantic interest towards this kid at all throughout the entire series. And this leads to this next part. But as soon as Ozma mentions Marina's name and their relationship, something flips in her and she starts being touchy and romantic with him, almost as if she's taking revenge for all the bullying Marina did by taking Ozma away from her. If that is true, I don't like that. If that is true, I don't like it for two reasons. One, because we have had no lead up. Again, Shizuka throughout the entire series has shown zero, could not get more asexual in her lack of attraction towards Ozma or any part of it. The only reason she asks him to turn in the camera in episode 4 is because she doesn't want to get in trouble and she wants to go find Chappie. She's not sexually manipulating him. She's just like, I don't want to get caught. Thanks for volunteering. And then that's it. So also she's been gone in the 2022 timeline and hasn't been growing up with him. So it's not good writing if she just shows back up and she's suddenly this femme fatale with no explanation to the audience of why that happened. I'm like, that's not good writing. I don't like that. And then two, I'm like, her getting revenge from Marina. Marina never took Ozma away from her when she was a kid. She bullied her. So it just, I don't like it because I don't think it's good writing. I think it's kind of weak sauce. That's the only way I can put it. So that's my thought about that scene. I'm in a good mood, y'all. But Slender Cucumber's comment, I appreciate the comment. I just had some discrepancies that I want to put out there. And then Slender Cucumber, their comment, now I do agree with a lot of what Slender Cucumber says with this. They said, the more I watch this show and your reaction to it, the more I get the impression the author did not want to create a great that's a choice, round story with no plot holes and nuance, but rather wanted to create reactions and discourse about the themes in the series and let the audience expand upon it and create nuance and fill in the holes for the show themselves. So I agree that the added depth and scenarios you came up with, I think it's meant to trigger such thoughts with the viewers. In a sense, we, the audience, experience the absurdity of another world like Takopi's does when he enters the human world, and we try to solve this fictional world with our premise of our human world. Well, my one thing I would say about this is it's not that it's the plot holes, because there are some like 10 out of 10 shows that I've watched that have plot holes. Like Neon Genesis Evangelion and Attack on Titan. You could argue there's plot holes in those shows. Sure, there could be. I would not disagree with you on some people brought them up and I'm like, I don't disagree with that. But I think that the show's quality and the writing of it, to me, in my opinion, again, literature's subjective. It is subjective. There's some people that might give this show a 0 out of 5 stars. Are they wrong? No. It's subjective. That's their opinion. And there's some people that give this a 5 out of 5 stars. Are they wrong? No, that's their opinion. I find it, again, this is with commenters on YouTube, especially in fandoms, and I've noticed this more and more in reactions, that since I've been on this channel for about 5 years, I feel like it's hard for some people to grapple with the idea that your show doesn't have to be perfect. And your show can have holes. It can need improvement. It can have flaws. Does that mean that it's not of value? No, not at all. Is it okay to love a show and still find critiques with it? Yes, that's called media literacy, and that's you being a critical thinker and using your brain and noodle and not just accepting everything and saying, I have to agree with it and comply and to be accepted in a society. Welcome. So yeah, I'm just like, I like this show a lot, But I feel like if I question anything, people are going to be like, she hates it. And I'm like, that is farthest from the truth. If you want me to hate it, you can make me at a certain point, but I don't hate this show. I just point out that for me and my preferences as a reactor and as a viewer, here's what I like to see in shows. And when it doesn't have that, or there's a part that's confusing, or I'm like, I feel obligated as a reactor. You're watching me for my opinions. I feel obligated to let you know what those are. But I will say that as far as Slender Cucumber, and several people have pointed out, I really like and appreciate people sharing their stories. I was really concerned. Now, granted, I've not looked at YouTube comments yet because YouTube comments for episode 5 haven't come out yet. But with Patreon, I have been really, really pleased and happy that people, even if they disagreed or even if they thought differently, have been very kind and considerate. You all are proving there's still good in the world. So good for you. Good on you. Good for you. Good on you. I'm glad. I'm appreciative. Thank you. I'm grateful. What else can I say? It just made me feel really great because I was dreading the comments for episodes 4 and 5. I was like, oh, people are going to be so mad and they're going to try to rip me a new one. But y'all have been very supportive and kind and sharing your perspectives. And they've helped me to kind of like go, yeah, no, I get that. That's a great point. So thank you for doing that. That's awesome. Now, I'm going to try to remember if I can. I don't know where this is. There we go, Huck. I'm going to try to remember because NYC Reaching back in episode 1 said I needed to watch the OP with English lyrics and subtitles. I'm going to try to remember to watch that. So I'm going to keep that over here to do that as well. But yeah, I've talked for plenty of time at this point. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching with me and for being so supportive week to week. This series has been great. I'm curious to see how it ends. So let's not waste any more time. We are going to start Takopi's Original Sin episode 6, the finale. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And I'll see you all on the other side. Well, okay. That was an interesting ending. I feel very conflicted. I want to be nice, so I want to be nice and go through this because I'm very conflicted. I looked up the writer of Takopi's Original Sin. It's Taizon 5, which makes me think they're young. So I don't know how old Taizon 5 is. They started creating manga in 2020, so only 5 years ago. This series is not very old. This series came out between 2021 and 2022. So the series only came out like 3 years ago, and it got adapted very quickly. Like there's some manga that are in manga hell that are like, really, we couldn't get adapted. But I think it helps Takopi's Original Sin because there's only 16 chapters of the manga. There's only 2 volumes. So it's a very quick series to be adapted. You don't have to worry about it being like a 50 volume series that they've got to adapt and worry about. They're like, oh, we can do this in 6 episodes. Done. And I will say, my biggest compliment to this series is the animation, the sound design, everything about how this series looks is perfect. There is nothing I would change as far as the animation, the voice work, the sound design, everything involved with that is perfection. So if you're somebody that likes to watch anime for the visual spectacle, style is there. And this series has substance. Do not get it twisted. This series is style and substance. We're going to talk about that substance in this last episode, but it is definitely a beautiful series. They've done a 6-volume series that followed up this called the Ichinose Family's Deadly Sins. That was 6 volumes from 2022 to 2023, and then they've done 2 one-shots since then. So they're pretty young mangaka. A young mangaka. I don't know how young they are, but they are pretty young. As far as the OP lyrics go, I looked them up on Lyric Finder for the OP. The English lyrics, basically talking about, see, it's just like, oh God, there's like a little thing. I'm like, no. Cut that sound out. It's just like before. As always, you trace a line of glass. It's back to the way it was, even things broken to pieces someday. Nice to meet you. I'm the light that I ruined. Ooh, I like that line. With cracked skin, I distort you, a prism. No one notices. Nothing can be heard. If only I could just melt it all away, it would be easier. Still, over and over, again and again, I repeat, again and again, I piece the fragments back together, over and over, again and again, I repeat, dulling both sensitivity and saturation. See, it's just like before. As always, you trace a line of glass. See, it's back to the way it was. Even broken things to pieces someday. I don't understand, I'm sorry. Where is the magic now? As for the rest of our hide and seek, well, let's continue it tomorrow, please. An empty kitchen, an annoying sunset, and a drain. 100 yen cream bun can't help me memorize what love is. I trace the lines on your cheek because I'll become the magic, be the reason why. Let's talk about something wonderfully foolish, something that's more transparent than anything else. Light, fragments in your hand. Nice. I mean, I feel like inadvertently that gives a little bit of context to what Takopi is doing at the end. But if I had looked at the lyrics at the beginning of the series, I probably would not have pieced that together. So that is what it is. I have thoughts about this last episode. All right. I have thoughts. I have pieced together. I have thoughts about it. We're going to talk about those thoughts. And kind of just to place where my thoughts about this are. I want to go through first just the contents of the episode and then my overall thoughts about the series. So we start out with what on the outskirts appears to be the mom yelling at Marina's dad, because if you recall, Marina's dad and Shizuka's dad look eerily similar. They're not the same, but they look eerily similar. And then what we realize is that no, Shizuka is just having a moment where she's watching her parents argue in the past. And then she looks over and Chappie is there. Now, I'm going to be honest. I was a little confused by this scene because Chappie is a puppy in this point here. But then the dad, when she went and saw him last episode, the dad had like a full-on family with a daughter that looked like she was near Shizuka's age and at least a 2-year-old. So I don't know if it's a continuity issue with the show, if the series is, if Shizuka, like, to make that make sense, if the dad left the mom to go have the other family, Shizuka would have needed to be like 1 or 2. But if he didn't and he had this secret family while being with the mom, I guess that could be the case. But they don't really specify that. So it felt like a plot hole, but then it was like, it's okay. It was a little confusing because, again, the sadness of Shizuka having the same outfit for years is really, really sad. But yeah, and she does look younger in that one scene, but it just was a little confusing from the onset. She says, when I wished upon a star when I was in trouble. She's like, I wished for a dad that wouldn't leave. I wished for a tasty school lunch. I wished for fun with a school without bullies, but was it truly what I wanted? I mean, from the end of this episode, I think what she really wanted was a friend. What she really wanted was somebody to care about her and someone to love her. The irony of all ironies is that Takopi really just should never... I don't want to say Takopi shouldn't have been there from the start, because Takopi does end up influencing them and saving the day in the end, but Takopi, until the very last Deus Ex Machina, Doodle Ex Machina moment, really did not add what I thought they were going to add. I can't say they didn't add anything, because they did. Especially in episode 1, Takopi was trying to make Shizuka feel like someone cared about her, but then I guess what I expected was Takopi to either go one of two directions, whereas Takopi either would become someone that would befriend Shizuka and the others and make their lives better through those interactions, which is not what happened, or Takopi would end up being like the bane of this and the cause of it, and they'd have to rectify by just going back and not existing. And that's kind of what happened, but not what happened. So it was interesting. It's not what I expected. So, I mean, let's skip the intro. So we get back to this. Now, I am assuming, we don't know. Part of what I wanted to know was, like, Ozma has all the camera and everything. So did Ozma clean the blood off of the camera and then bring it back to give it back to Takopi? That's never specified. We find out that the reason why the clinic is closed is not because Ozma turned himself in like Shizuka asked him to, and it's not because they're being interviewed by the police or whatever. She's stressed and sick because Junya has got fired from his job and used the last of his paycheck to buy Ozma some new glasses. Which is it. I really liked that sentiment. I liked the idea of Junya buying the glasses for Ozma because he needed a new pair of glasses, and Ozma didn't want to ask the mom because he knew the mom would get mad and possibly abuse him some more. So Junya got him the glasses instead, and I like that. I like that little point there. I wish we'd had more with it. I wish we'd go further into that, but we don't. That's not important anymore. So it just kind of gets dropped. Junya gets dropped. We don't talk about him anymore. And I'm like, but that's not the point. So he's like, I returned to Earth. And so Takopi basically explains everything that happened, and Ozma's just kind of frustrated by it. Now that we know that Ozma's wearing Junya's old t-shirt, it makes me very heartfelt for his character. Yeah, and he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You're like, you're not making any sense. He's like, we should go find Shizuka. And I'm like, were you going to plan to kill her or whatever? And so Ozma's like, no, I can't help you anymore. He's like, I can't see Shizuka anymore. This is the last time I'll see you. My family's going through a lot right now. I guess one point that I'm kind of like very torn about is the idea that Ozma can't be with Shizuka. That it will never work for Ozma to be... They kind of established in this timeline that Ozma has to just let her go and go do his own thing. And I'm very torn about it because on the one hand, do I like the queer platonic friends, possible Yuri between Marina and Shizuka at the end? Yes, I really like it a lot, actually. I'm totally here for it. Febu Yuri indeed. But do I feel like it paints this picture of, oh, these guys and girls can't be friends because there's going to be jealousy and sexual attraction and stuff, so they got to go separate ways? I don't know how I feel about that. I don't think the series is making that commentary. But then, in my perspective, I'm like, can Ozma not be friends with Shizuka because he's in love with her? And he won't be able to do what he needs to do because he'll be swayed by her feminine wiles that she did not have up until the last moment of episode 5. And it's like, it's almost as if the three of them can never be friends because there's going to be an awkward sexual wedge thrown between them. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how I feel about that lesson of, oh, well, guys and girls can't be friends because, especially if there's two girls and a guy, because then there's going to be jealousy and tension. I don't like that. So I don't know how I feel about that. And I don't know how I feel about the idea that Ozma has to go a separate way. Can't be friends with the poor girl because then all this happens. It left a sour taste in my mouth watching him not be able to be friends with her. And I don't know why the mangaka, what message they're trying to portray through that storyline. I get the idea of it's important that Marina and Shizuka become friends because that was what we talked about at the very beginning of the series. But I'm kind of like, can they not become friends with Ozma now? They have to sacrifice that? We can't have all three of them be friends with each other? That's not possible? I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't like it, but I don't know why exactly the mangaka went that route. So, because I mean, it could be like, why couldn't you have at the very end? Why couldn't Ozma be friends with both of them? We're going to go back to that scene when he's in the classroom. We're going to go back. So we do find out that Ozma's dad returns. We don't see him. Is he a piece of shit like every other parent in this series? Who knows? But he says who knows what's going to happen to the clinic because his brother gets fired. His brother got fired from his job. I'm like, well, can't he just find another job? I don't know. And he's like, and so Takopi makes known to the series that Takopi doesn't understand what's going on and is very dumb. Takopi is just a dumb little alien that I find it kind of refreshing because usually the aliens are the ones that are all knowing and have this like exponential knowledge from the stars, and humans are the ones that aren't privy to the ways of the world. And I do like the subversion of Takopi being the one that has no freaking clue how humanity works. And Ozma's like, people can be good and bad. That's just how humans are. Funny you should say that, Ozma, because none of the parents in this series are good and bad. None of them are portrayed that way realistically at all. You say that, but what we've seen of humanity so far above the age of 17 would contradict what you're saying. But it's great that he notes that, right? I feel like a lot of this story is from the kids' perspective, and that's something that comes out by the end of this, and we'll get to the overall theme when we get to it. But yeah, I feel like going through this episode, the whole series, we'll talk more about it when we get to the end. Don't worry. We'll talk more about it when we get to Marina versus Shizuka. I'm going to come back to this. But it becomes very clear. It's been clear throughout most of the series that this is all from a kid's perspective, like from a child's perspective when you're going through trauma, from a child's perspective when you're going through abuse, then it's very easy to believe that there's nobody on your side. It's very easy to believe that there's nobody who is rooting for you or has belief in you or loves you or cares for you. And I understand that because I've been that way. I've been through that. Personal experience, I've been through it. And I remember when I was maybe, not 9, but maybe like 10 through 13, it was very easy to believe that. But I did have, friends and their parents and adults in my life who showed me that that was not the case. Now, is it possible that there's people that go through life when they're young that believe there are no good parents out there and no adult figures that care about them? Yeah, sure. But I feel like in a lot of cases, not in all, but in a lot of cases, there are good adults and authority figures who are trying to help. And this series is just showing a very narrow tunnel vision view of how abuse makes you tunnel visioned, where you can't see all of those things. And that's fine. I mean, I get what it's doing now. It's very much, it's intentionally from the kid's perspective of here's all the bad things that happen during trauma and abuse, and here's how the world looks when you're 9 years old, and it doesn't seem like there's any good things. We're going to talk about the overall message of this series and go back to it. There's a part of me that feels I'm too old for this show. I feel like I'm in my like very late mid-30s, right? I'm 37. I feel like this show is meant for like a 20-year-old. And I don't mean to, I'm not trying to say anything against people that are young, but I feel like if you grew up in an environment with abuse and generational trauma, here, same person, right here, yes. If I was 20 and watched this show, I would have thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Hands down. I would have. Because it would have reached a very emotional point in my life where I could think back, before I started this discussion, I was thinking back, I'm like, how old, if I watched this when I was between the ages of 16 to 22, I would have thought this was the greatest anime in the world. But I'm 37 now, and I've watched other series, and I've also been through other life experiences where I'm like, yeah, this is very much meant for like a younger audience. And I feel like the manga being in Shonen Jump is meant for a younger audience. So if you, and that's not to say, I don't want it to get twisted. If you're 57 and watch this and think it's the greatest anime in the world, I'm not disputing you at all. I don't think that's not valid. I think it's valid completely. I think for me, I might be a little aged out to have the same reaction to some of the elements of this series just because of what I've watched, what I've experienced, just kind of my views as a teacher, as a writer. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like for me, I might be an aged cup of tea for this one, but we're going to go through it anyway, right? That was kind of my thought. I was like, oh, okay, I get what the point of this is now. It all makes sense. So yeah, so Takopi goes on about how Shizuka is nice but mean, and how does that work together? I don't understand. And Azuma's like, you're an idiot. Azuma's like, you're a dumb octopus alien. People can be good and bad at the same time. You're just now realizing that? And he's like, she's good and she's bad. She doesn't do her homework. And as for me, he's like, well, why are you? And he's like, it was fun when the three of us hung out. And I looked forward to going to school for the first time because we were friends. Even though you're a dumb airhead who's no better than a piece of trash, you're kind. And I see the part here was that Ozma having like the little H Banana 7 called him like the little glimmer of salvation in his eyes. And you could tell Ozma enjoyed being with them. So I'm like, why can't he be with them in the future? You called me amazing, even though I'm a useless, hopeless idiot. I feel like he was projecting a little bit onto Shizuka in that moment, because Shizuka also called him amazing. And when he says an airhead that's dumb, I'm like, is he also talking about Shizuka as well? Because she was kind. You're too stupid to lie. I came to say thank you. There's a part of me that wanted him to say thank you to Shizuka too, because Shizuka was nice to him. That's the thing, Shizuka kind of was nice to him to a point before she used him. So I don't know if that's an inconsistency with the characters or how that is. I just was like, I get him telling thank you to Takopi in a sense, but I'm also like, you and Takopi never really bonded. So Takopi bonded with Marina and Shizuka. He never really bonded with you. He only helped you out that one time in your brother's room, but that turned out to be a disaster. So why aren't you saying thank you to Shizuka? Shouldn't you be saying thank you to her too? I don't know. He's like, isn't this your gadget? It's nice of him to clean off the blood. Nice of him to do that. He's like, I had lots of fun hanging out with you two. I tried saving Kuze-san just to impress myself. But in the end, I couldn't do anything. I bet trying to save her was a mistake in the first place. And see, that's the part that I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that very bleak view of... I don't know how I feel about that bleak view of I loved her and that was I was attracted to her and that was a mistake. I was saving her for myself. I feel that could be stronger. It kind of felt weak. It felt like I felt like kind of let down by that logic. I was like, well, and I think part of it is we didn't have enough time to really explore things with that. It just sort of happened over the course of a few episodes. And then he's like, I shouldn't have even tried to help her in the first place. I was just doing it for myself and not for her, which is a fair assumption, which is a fair logic. But I'm like, so does that mean that if you are being selfish, you can't ever be friends with people? I'm like, I'm like, you can't be friends with her. So basically, I'm like, you were attracted to her. But it's like, so you were either attracted to her, because in the other timelines, you were attracted to her always. And you're like, I should never have even gotten near her because then I'm going to get attracted to her. And then I'll, enable her. So let me just stay away from her altogether. But then I can't help someone because what if I'm attracted to them? It's weird. I don't like it. It's weird. It's a weird logic. I was like, okay. I feel bad for saying, I don't know how else to say that I'm maybe older than this series intends me to be. I don't know. I feel bad saying that. I don't think there's anything wrong with liking this series a lot if you're my age. I like this series. Is it the anime of the year? No, I don't think so. Is it the best? Is it maybe the most beautifully animated of the year? Now that, you can argue with me. It's one of the most beautiful things I've seen all year. Absolutely. Is it story-wise and theme-wise? We'll talk about the theme, but I think story-wise and writing-wise, it's not the strongest of the year that I've seen. Not by a long shot. But anyway, so he has the new glasses. He talks about it. He's like, I'm just gonna go, bye. And so then he leaves. I felt bad for Ozma in this scene where he talks about his brother getting fired and getting him the glasses, because I know he feels guilty about that. Like, his brother used his last paycheck to get him the glasses. But again, there's a part of me that's like, you shouldn't feel bad. Your brother made these decisions. And if your brother's decisions make you feel bad, I'm like, come on, Ozma, don't feel sad. That's not cool. And then he just leaves. And he's like, do me a favor. There's a gadget that can rewind time, right? If you bump into me again, tell that version of me, don't be afraid to have fights with your big bro. So I guess one thing that Takopi's powers aren't really explicitly stated in this is that he has the ability to sacrifice himself so he can embed wisdom and knowledge of previous time travel into their minds moving forward into the future, but he goes back in time. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the picture. it is such a Deus Ex Machina. It is such a Greek tragedy. Apollo's chariot coming down in the final hour to swoop everything up and clean everything up and make it all have a happy ending. I am conflicted about it, but we'll talk about it very shortly. He's like, don't be afraid to have fights with your brother. I guess the only thing is, I guess by having fights with your big bro, it means you're talking to your big bro and not just avoiding him, which means that you guys get closer and connect and you don't wait till the end to realize that your brother actually loves you. So that's fine. I like that. So yeah, all these kids crying. This episode did not emotionally move me like the first episode that felt so genuine and raw. This one felt like, I'm gonna save my thoughts because I want to articulate them. He's like, trying to help her wasn't enough. So we have all this time pass, like seasons pass, which means months pass. And it says 2 young girls go missing in Tokyo. A cry of grief, give us our daughters back. And then it says the truth behind the kidnapping case. And it says the Yamashita family, the mysterious disappearance, voices of relief as 2 girls are found safe. I just like that right there. So there's a whole plot line where Shizuka's family, her half-sisters, were kidnapped and then possibly released. What? Why did we skim over that? Why was that even... That's one thing. Why bring it up if you're not going to do anything with it? That whole part there, like, you could have just had the passage of time and gotten back to this part here. Why did you show us those newspapers with that story if it had 0 impact on the actual story? Because it really doesn't have any impact. It doesn't mean anything. It's never brought up again. It's not established. Shizuka was basically in the same emotional state as she was back in Tokyo. So why bring up the fact that the sisters were kidnapped by Shizuka? Because Shizuka there are no repercussions for any of them in this. Shizuka has no repercussions for kidnapping the sisters, if that were the case. No repercussions for killing Marina, because we go back in. So I was like, then why bother with the whole newspaper part? Anyway, I was very confused by that. I was like, what was the point of showing us that? Because it had no impact. And so she shows back up. She has the trinkets and the items that she took. She still has Chappie's collar. Somehow Chappie lives in this other timeline. I'm guessing we're going to go back to the whole thing because I had thoughts about Chappie. We're going to go back to that. But yeah, she's mad. And there's parts of her that are in despair. There's a little part of her that has like a gleam left in her eye. And she basically just beats the bejesus out of Takopi, saying, I need to look inside the stomachs of the staff too. So she kidnapped the sisters, wasn't arrested for it. Nothing came of it. It's just something that happens, you know. Kids, don't try this at home. She's like, you'll make the people at the animal shelter sad if you do that. So she's like, a lot of this was Takopi waiting until the very last minute to talk to her. And so a big part of this was Takopi saying, I know you've gone through a lot and have been by yourself for a long time. And she squishes saying, well, what was I supposed to do? My dad looked at me like he didn't know me, which is sad and sucks. What should I have done? And that's the thing. There wasn't anything she could have done. There's nothing she could have done. If dad's not my dad, what am I supposed to do? Well, that's the thing. Normally there'd be some adult figure in this world that would help answer those questions or help you walk through it, like what Takopi does in being kind, but that's all reserved for Takopi in this moment. When I was told I couldn't get the ferry by myself, what else could I have done? I guess that's when she kidnapped the sisters. I don't have a grown-up who'll look after me. Well, that is the mangaka's fault for not writing that in there. That's kind of there on them. They deliberately chose that in this. And yeah, to be fair, there are people who are in those situations where they don't have an adult to look after me. And that's awful. And it's like, well, what do you do? Well, sometimes I guess they end up like Shizuka. Sometimes they end up going somewhere where there are those adults. But then other times it's like, we're getting to the point of the series where it's, you know, finding the friend who's your peer to connect with, which, you know, is very valid and important. But then as she's squishing Takopi, and Takopi's like, my mom stopped coming home. What should I have done then? And yeah, and what about when my notebook went missing? So yeah, they all say I stink, but where do I stink? That line got me. Of all the lines that Shizuka said, the where do I stink, that, oof, that line's rough. That line is rough. Because that's full of, like, entendre, and that's full of, like, by stink, do you mean literally? Do you mean metaphorically? What do you say about that? Like, that was a really crushing line. My mom never told me. Yeah. And they're like, well, I feel like a lot of this, though, it's built up over the course of the entire series, where Shizuka has been so inactive. Shizuka hasn't done anything up until episode 5, when she runs off with Takopi to go to Tokyo. She's been on the sidelines, not saying anything, not participating, not doing anything there. And there is something to that. There's a disassociation there. It makes sense. I don't think I was quite moved like I'm supposed to be in this moment, because again, I'm like, well, girl, you never said anything. You never did anything. So yeah, if you don't do anything, or you never question anything or say any of this out loud, no, you're not gonna get any answers. Nobody's gonna know. And it's not Shizuka's fault. That's not her fault, because she's 9. She doesn't know any better. And so there is a sadness there that this girl doesn't know any better, and she's just lashing out with anger because she doesn't know what to do. But I'm also like, well, the school system has failed you, because they should be teaching you some stuff about this. They should be helping you work that out if your parents aren't able to. Your parents have failed you because they're not going over this with you. This town has failed you because there's no one here that's taking, a notice of these things. The authorities have failed you. Like, I feel like all of this in this story, her questions here in this big dire moment, all hinge on the fact that there have been failures across the board in every single avenue of the system. Whereas there's another part of me that's like, well, I guess I didn't respond as emotionally to this scene, because I'm like, well, of course she's responding this way, because the mangaka has set it up for her to respond this way. Why? What else do we expect? Whereas I feel like if earlier in the story, if she had spoken up, if she had made these attempts, if she had tried asking questions, and then she was denied those answers, it would have made this that much more heartbreaking. Like, if she had been asking her dad questions, and not just had the door slammed in her face, if she had been in there, like I talked last episode, if she'd been able to sit down and ask him questions and he just denied her those answers, it's like, oh, okay. Or if she had asked the police questions and they denied her, then if we'd seen more of this child asking the system and being denied access to those answers, then it would have made this that much heartbreaking, because then as she's telling Takopi, she's like, she could have been like, I've been asking questions, I've been trying to do something, and nothing's working, no one's helping. Then I would have been so much more emotionally affected, because I would have been like, yeah, she's tried and the system's failed her. But here in this story, Shizuka didn't try. She didn't know to try. And that's not Shizuka's fault. I'm not saying that Shizuka should have known to do anything, but it kind of feels hollow. Hollow might be the word. It feels like hollow emotional upheaval when you're just trying to be like, yeah, feel sorry for me. And I'm like, well, but you didn't do anything. It's like, yeah. So, I mean, I feel sorry for Azuma, because Azuma did try things. Azuma did try. And we saw where he was met with resistance. Marina, in some respects, we see her and the system around her fail her. And so it's not to the extent of Azuma, but it is a little bit more than Shizuka. But anyway, I guess that's why I was just like, ugh. It's like, what was I supposed to do when I couldn't see my dad whenever I wanted? What should I have done when nobody turned up at school on Parents' Day? Yeah, well, if you were at a good school, a teacher probably would have noticed that. And if you were at a real school system, they probably would have made an effort to get a hold of them or something. But, and I guess that's another thing. That's the other thing, too. I am old enough now. I work at an institution that's an educational facility. And I also have been working with school boards. I've been working in high schools and grade schools. I see how the system works. And this is in the US, so I don't know how Japan works in comparison, but I see how the US system works. And I'm kind of like, whenever this kid is saying this, it's like, of course Shizuka would say this because she's 9. And when you're 9, you don't know how the system works. You don't know how it works. When I was 20 years old, I didn't know how the system worked. So I was fresh out of high school. I didn't understand that. But now I'm at an age where I know, and I'm kind of like, yeah, but in a real story with some realism, this would be what happened. And I know people are going to say, well, this isn't a real story. It's more like a fairy tale, or it's more vague, or it's more that. I'm like, fair. But then when you try to make these arguments that are grounded in reality, you can't make those grounded arguments if it's a fairy tale. You can't make those grounded arguments be as effective as they might need to be if you're not grounding in realism, you know? So I don't know. It just did not work for me as much because I was like, yeah, but also these things didn't happen that were supposed to. And says, what am I supposed to do when everyone got mad at me about Chappie barking too loudly? I mean, that's fair. That's fair. And then she goes on, what should I have done when an adult asked, are your parents home, but no one was? I would have said no parents were home. But, you know, I get it. Who should I have talked to about these things? And that's kind of the problem. Nobody ever cared about me. Remember? All of it. What are you saying I should have done? And I think that's the part that, again, rings a little hollow, is that you've created a world where there are no helping adults. So yeah, you would be asking these questions. And it's kind of like you've forced your characters into a corner where they have no choice but to ask them, right? The same thing happened in Attack on Titan. There was a moment in the series where I was like, well, of course these characters are making these decisions because you've given them no alternatives. They don't have a choice. In the real world, there would be maybe a choice, and that's a whole different discussion. But I'm like, yeah. But again, we're getting to the point of what the mangaka actually wants this story to be about. And we're going to get there. And I'm going to be like, okay. So, but we're getting there. Like, what should I have done? And Takopi's like, I have no idea. It's too hard for me to understand. And then I like the happy handshake amidst Shizuka telling Takopi that they're useless. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything for you. And I'm sorry for always trying to do something for you when I had no idea how you felt. I feel like in some respects, the mangaka is making Takopi kind of an adult surrogate, because I feel like throughout the story, maybe the mangaka, and I agree and disagree with this because, again, I'm 37, so I've been around the block a little bit. But I feel like there's a part of me that I get the mangaka is trying to be like, well, adults sometimes assume that they know what's best for a child without really hearing them out and knowing how they feel. I hear that a lot, especially online. And I'm like, okay. And I could see that Takopi is kind of maybe a surrogate for that, where Takopi was trying to impose their own solutions to a problem that they didn't fully understand. They were trying to impose solutions and their own ideas without really knowing what Shizuka was going through or their thoughts. And granted, Shizuka wasn't telling those thoughts. So, I mean, anybody in that scenario would kind of be in the same boat. But the moral is, you know, you need to understand what that person's going through and be able to empathize with them before you can really take that next step. And Takopi didn't know to do that. And then it led to all of these problems getting kind of like, you know, spreading even further. Takopi didn't listen. Wasn't listening and wasn't asking questions to try to understand. They were just like, oh yeah, I can solve this problem, and wasn't really figuring out what needed to happen. I'm sorry for leaving you all by yourself. My dad won't come back no matter how much you apologize. My mom doesn't love me either. And Chappie won't come back either. Well, I don't know. That's a different world line though. I do love, and then Shizuka's like, it's too late for everything. That shot of Shizuka crying and Takopi trying to give her a hug is probably going to be the thumbnail because it's such an iconic shot, right? But damn, such an iconic shot. It just, I felt so bad for all of these kids because they all were just in the worst case scenario, but I felt really bad for them, and I do. And there's lots of people that are out there that are like that in that situation. And I feel I have felt a part of myself in every one of these kids. And it's, you know, you're just like, you feel for them. But it also kind of makes me, in the back of my mind, I look at the series and go, oh, well, you've also cultured this environment and have kind of manipulated the viewer into this, like, manipulated is maybe not it's maybe a stronger word than I need to use, but I feel like the series in this episode felt like they were basically soliciting tears. This episode felt like they were like, see how deep into the darkness we've drug you, see how into the despair we've drug you, and there's no hope for these children. Now cry with these kids. Is like what it felt like. It was just like begging me to cry. And I don't know. I feel like I feel like this series was trying to like bait you to cry. It was baiting you to feel, and it's like, we're going to make you go through all this horrible stuff, and that'll get your tear ducts a working. And for me, I'm kind of like, you're trying to trick me. And I'm a salesman's nightmare, first and foremost. In the real world, I'm a salesman's nightmare. I'm like, if you're trying to push propaganda onto me, my years of training in rhetoric will tell me, no, that's not gonna work. I feel like it really works when it comes from this place of authenticity, and it comes from this place of sincerity. And there are parts of Takopi's original sin that comes from a very real place of sincerity. Like I said last week, episodes 1 through 3 come from that place of deep down sincerity. But episodes 4 and 5, because it was really just trying to hammer into the despair and darkness. I mean, the part with Junia, I loved in episode 4. I went back and rewatched episode 4 last week. I do like episode 4 and give it more credit than I did last week with episode 5 when I was talking about it. I do like the Junia and Ozma scene. I've warmed up to it. I've cooled down since I watched episode 4, and I really like that scene now. I think it is a beautiful scene, and it's very touching, and I like it a lot. But I feel like episode 5 was just like, dark, despair. There's characters at their lowest point. And I'm like, well, but they didn't have to be. I was like, they didn't have to be, but okay. So that's kind of like, that's where I've been with it. And so then there's a scene of them walking through. I will say, the little graphic of Shizuka holding Takopi and walking very sadly is, it's almost cute. I don't know how else to describe it. It's really sad, but it's almost cutesy. And then she just like has this moment of catharsis where she stops like sobbing and is just silently weeping. I've been there. Know what that's like. It's not a fun time. And her sleeping on the ground with Takopi, crying, and like she's just crying nonstop until they get to the sweet truck. And then she finds in her notebook like a little 500 yen piece saying to use when they're in serious trouble, and they just spend it on a piece of milk bread. And then the scissors that Takopi's trying to like cut her hair. And she's still like getting into Takopi as they're like hitting each other as they're crying. I mean, they're just crying nonstop for several minutes, right? And that's understandable, and it's sad. And I feel for Shizuka a lot in this moment. I feel for her. So then Takopi's like, oh, hey, I'm so happy. And Shizuka's like, oh, yeah. They're like, by the way, I have a special gadget I want to show you. It's the happy camera. You can take a photo with it and feed it back into the camera. And my thing is, so Takopi kept the picture the whole time. It's broken and it won't do anything. But do you know what, Shizuka? I got my memories back. Again, I have two thoughts about this. One, you got your memories back before you went on this long, arduous journey and let this girl sob her eyes out for days. Why didn't you just immediately go to, oh, hey, by the way, before you sob for 2 days continuously and exhaust yourself? Because if you've ever been in the grieving process for multiple days, like if someone you love dies and you've been in the grieving process for multiple days, hi, me, been there, and someone told you, hey, I could go back and change all this, but I wanted to make you like cry it out for a couple days, I've been like, bastard, what? I'd be like, excuse me, you bitch, what are you making me do? No, why didn't you do this 48 hours ago? But I don't know. This is supposed to be the cathartic moment, the big moment where Takopi reveals that they've realized upon regaining their memories that they were going to kill Shizuka. But then they were like, no, I can't kill Shizuka. That part was weird too. We had last episode end. Episode 5 ended with Takopi being like, oh, I have to kill Shizuka to fix everything. But this episode completely abandons the plot of all that that wasn't important. That very rash decision of murder, we've just abandoned that, so that's not even a thing anymore. And if it was supposed to be like a prior thought before the memories were gone, like, anyway, they're like, there's one last thing I can do for you, and I'm like, oh, so we're gonna be a Deus Ex Machina, okay. And they press the button, and they're like, my happy powers, which have never been explained, never remotely talked about. Just my camera will function one last time. Is it a cop-out? A little bit. A little bit. And I'm sure that you could argue, somebody would be like, well, but there was no other way. And I'm like, no, right. That's because of the writing. Whenever people are like, but there was no other way, I'm like, well, yeah, because the writer made it that way. Like, they wrote themselves into a corner, and then they had no other way to get around it, so then they had to do this because there were no other explanations. You could have wrote anything. You could have had the Mama Tentacle send another Takopi to the planet. You could have had a spaceship come by like another Deus Ex Machina and swoop them away. You could have done whatever you wanted to. You're the writer of the series. But I feel like the whole, oh, the camera's gonna work one more time. I was like, oh, we wrote ourselves into a corner, and that's how we got out of it. All right, I'll take it. The teacher in me was just like, oh. Now, granted, it is a beautifully animated scene, and there is some sentimentality of Takopi saying, I'll give you the biggest smile on your face, and I'll make you happy, and it's all like tears, tears, tears. This whole episode's been tears, tears, tears. I'll make you smile. It's a beautiful animated scene. I was just sitting here watching it going, so that's our solution, okay. And they're like, thank you for playing with me. But again, there's no explanation of, so Takopi is just like going back into, so if we understand this correctly, I didn't bring White Borcoon out. White Borcoon's getting a break. So we have this thing that Takopi is infusing their soul into the picture, and their soul is going to be a reminder. I'm watching Steins Gate at the same time as this series, so I'm like, oh, this is an interesting way of going through world lines. So Takopi is infusing their soul into the picture through the camera that will never be used again to imprint themselves, go back in the past before Marina died one more time. And so they'll all interact in their lives amongst each other, but it will be all of the things from the prior world line, the prior timeline will be infused in this one. All of Takopi's memories will be dispersed between the three of them, and anytime they're planning on something, they'll remember back to Takopi and scapegoat Takopi for all their anger and aggression. Am I wrong? I don't know. I was just like, what? I was like, okay. So he says thank you, and he's like, Takopi, and then we go back to the moment, but Takopi is no longer there. They've sacrificed themselves and the camera and all the gadgets, and we just go back to the beginning, and we cut back to the moment, and Takopi is like there as a shoulder angel, as a presence. We re-experience the school scenario. Now, Ozma in this scenario, the only thing that kind of doesn't make sense with this and doesn't add up is that, because Ozma doesn't have the glasses they had before. Ozma in the prior timeline didn't get the glasses until, so we're establishing that we went back. But here's the thing. This is the part with the writing that I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So you went back and brought Marina back because we went back in the past. That part makes sense. We went back and Shizuka, Marina, that timeline makes sense. Ozma went back to before, but if you're going back to when the photo was taken, it was the next day. In the span of 24 hours, how did Ozma have time in 24 hours to talk to the brother and have a fight with him? And the brother used his paycheck, which wasn't his last paycheck, because that happens later on, like months down the road in the original timeline, to buy the glasses. That part of the timeline does not make sense. So, but here we are. So we're back to Marina being like, oh, you worthless freeloader. Do you have any shame being a drain on the welfare system? And you're not wearing the chameleon plant today, are you? But then Marina seems to be like, why did I say today? Like the memories of her past are there. And she gets freaked out and leaves. And then again, because Ozma-kun is not allowed to be friends any longer with Shizuka because boys and girls can't play together, I guess. He instead like plays video games and like my thing was too, I guess because was Ozma not telling people he had a video game system because he was too focused on his studies? Or, I mean, I get that Ozma has talked to his brother and everything's been solved in the past 24 hours, I guess, in this timeline. But I also was like, couldn't the people have asked him about the video? I felt like there needed to be in episode 1 or 2, people coming up to him and asking about the games and him not responding to make this scene make more sense. I don't know. Yeah. They're like, oh, that's cool. Let's play together someday. And he's like, oh. So basically, the lesson here is don't rely on your crush being your only friend. Especially if she's a girl, because she'll probably have a jealous other friend that'll be jealous of you too. And then it'll cause a lot of problems down the road. So I didn't know you were into games, though. And then he leaves behind Shizuka, and their paths never cross again. And the same was true. Now, with that being said, as much as the Ozma no longer being able to be friends with either of them storyline kind of makes me go, oh, womp womp. I do love the idea that Marina and Shizuka finally talk to each other. Which leads us to the point of the series. They finally have this conversation. The same was true for you too. You both were alone, and then they have this fight. And everything that's said, they each blame it. Like Marina blames Shizuka for everything bad that had happened. And then you have Takopi saying, like, she says, give me back my family. And then the light of her pen touches on this little doodle of Takopi in the journal. And then Marina remembers, I'm sorry. And there's 2 little dandelions that are supposed to represent Shizuka and Marina. These 2 little dandelions in the wind. Now, Takopi being the doodle in the notebook. Is it supernatural? Yeah, kind of. How do I feel about this doodle in a notebook kind of breaking through all of the traumatic pain that these 2 went through? Sure. Okay. All right. Let's do it. Because then they see the doodle and she's like, I don't know, it's just a doodle I drew. And she's like, well, it looks like garbage. But she instantly is like, oh, I'm not going to stab you with this pen anymore because of that doodle I saw in this notebook. Looks like garbage. Let's project all of our aggression and anger onto Takopi as this doodle instead of each other. Yeah, it just follows you around wherever you go and talks to you endlessly and just won't talk and does it instead. So the lesson of the story, the lesson of the series, and the reason why we haven't had any responsible adults in the world is because all the answers were if these 2 kids just talk to each other. And it's fine. It's fine. It's great. Like, yes, children, talk to each other. Don't be mean. Talk to each other. Sonic says. Takopi says. It really is a Sonic says moment when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I watched Sonic the Hedgehog, and it was an animated show, and there were 2 versions of it. There was the dark version, which is amazing. Tim Curry is in it. It's so good. And then there is we call it the Saturday morning version. I guess the Sat AM is the dark version. But there's also, like, the Sonic Adventures, Sonic and Friends, and it was, like, Sonic Tales, and all of the, like, first Sega game, like, villains were, like, just robot. It's, like, Ratchet and Clank and all that. Not Ratchet and Clank, but Grounder and whatever. But anyway, at the end of the funny series, Sonic would have, like, these Sonic says, like, come on, kids, don't talk to strangers. Don't do this. So I love the message of happiness born through talking. Love that message. And that message, you know, because Shizuka this whole time hasn't talked. How effective is that message? Because every time Shizuka tried to talk, Marina kicked her in the face. Every time Shizuka tried to make any effort to communicate with Marina, Marina tried to stab her in the face as well. But it's Takopi, through Takopi sacrificing himself and putting him in a notebook and making him like be forced to be present, it suddenly made them talk, and then that's the most important thing. And then they both cry and become friends. It just happens so suddenly. It happens so suddenly. There's no gradual nothing. No, it just like they talked and they looked at a doodle in a notebook. They finally talked to one another and gave each other 2 seconds of time, and that solved everything. And you know what? If your argument was that the whole point of there not being any realistic adults in this series is because the kids needed to learn to talk to themselves, then yeah, absolutely. I believe it. From the earlier episodes, if Shizuka had tried to talk to Marina, which is the point that is established here, would it have been effective? Or did you have to have a little pink alien make Marina feel like, oh, whoa, what's this weird thing? Like, take a step back and pause and reflect. Because I think if you'd had Shizuka talking to her any other time in the series, Shizuka would have said something and Marina wouldn't have listened. She still would have acted because she wouldn't have taken that pause to reflect. I think the message should be these kids should pause and reflect and get to know one another through talking and communication, and that will help solve the problem. I don't know how I feel about the message being like, you don't need a responsible adult, you just need to have a friend. That's all. And I'm like, I hate to say it that way. I do think it's very important and very valid that you need to have friends. This generation of young adults, because I coach them, because I teach them, are so socially isolated and so away from each other. They don't communicate in groups anymore. People don't hang out together anymore. It's a problem. Yeah, if this series is communicating to a younger audience that you need to not touch grass, I don't that phrase seems condescending sometimes to me, because I feel like kids are getting out and doing things. So I don't feel like that's necessarily, touch grass isn't the phrase, but a lot of them are self-isolating, or they're chronically online, or they're not interacting socially face to face anymore. And that's because of like the economy, because of travel, because of disparities, whatever. And I will say that technology helps bridge that gap in some ways, but it helps exacerbate the gaps in other ways. If this series makes people realize, makes teenagers realize, y'all need to talk to each other and you need to know each other's stories, then kudos. I appreciate that so much. I just don't know if I'm the target audience that this message would impact the most, because I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm also a communications major, and so talking with people is something I like doing. So, and she's like, I'm sorry, Mama, for not talking with you before I left. That was like the one referential thing to an adult that Takopi was like, oh, I should have talked to my mom before I left. And I was like, the one time a parent is referenced in some kind of light. But yeah, and so Soul Planet 3, to all of you in 2016, there are many things I couldn't do for you all. The Attack on Titan parallels are crazy, y'all. The Attack on Titan parallels are crazy. I am sad that, again, there were parents that deserved responsibility being, some reprimanding happening, and nothing of the sort was the point or even put back. But there's nothing I can do, but I hope that you see Ozma looking out. Again, I feel sad that Ozma can't hang out with them anymore, because that can't be a thing. Two girls can't hang out with a guy if they both like him. It won't work out. But yeah, I hope you all reach adulthood together. Well, I don't know if they can. But anyway. Okay. No, like, what are you looking at? Nothing. So yeah, then they walk back. All of these years of all this trauma was just solved in an instant. Which, yeah, you should talk to people. You should talk to friends. I do like the little after credit scene. So my question with the timeline was, okay, so did Marina did all this happen before Marina caused the dog to be sent away to the animal shelter? So that's why Chappie is there at the end, which is cool, which is fine. And then another part of it made me sad because Marina still had the scar on her face, meaning that her mom still is as awful as she was before. The one good thing is that they have each other. Like Marina and Shizuka have each other, which is great. Yeah. Your mom has it rough every day. And she's like, well, whose fault is that? And she's like, well, I'm better than your parents. And so, yeah, I like the idea that they both are kind to each other and they're friends, even if they rib each other a little bit. And they remembered the ballpoint pen of a rabbit from Saturn. And they're like, what was that? How should I know? You're the one who said it. And then there's a little cherry blossom. I do love it. If you ship Shizuka and Marina together as enemies to lovers, then what a story. What a story! What a story! So, to reference to you all, to give you some perspective, before I started this series, because it was only beat by like one vote on Patreon. I think To Be Hero X was the second place one, which I will watch when I finish Orb. When I finish Orb on the Movements of the Earth, we will get into To Be Hero X. Don't worry, that's coming in spring at some point. And I'm very excited about it. Please, no spoilers. But when I was recommended this show, I had it on the poll to begin with, because I had a lot of recommendations on YouTube. So thank you all on YouTube for recommending. That's awesome of you. But I saw things on social media where I was very apt to not be spoiled. So I didn't look at any posts that had images or anything like that. I was like, nope, nope, nope. But I kept hearing things like Anime of the Year is Takopi's Original Sin, Anime of the Decade, Best Anime I've Ever Seen, Complete Masterpiece, all of this. And I like this series a lot. Is it my favorite of the year so far? But it's really good. I think there's a lot of value to this series. I think this series has a lot of value in terms of how important it is. I think, is it groundbreaking? No. Series have done this. Like, I've watched like 4 or 5 series that have gone through the same tropes that this one does. Given. Go watch Given. Go watch March Comes In Like a Lion. Go watch Attack on Titan. Go watch In a Sense Bloom Into You. Go watch. There's a lot of series that touch on these same topics and do them in similar ways. Some better, some worse. Stars Align. Go watch Stars Align. I've seen this. Nothing in this series was groundbreaking or revolutionary, but I think that, one, it's only 6 episodes, so I feel like a lot of people watched it because it was a short watch, and I'm not saying the TikTok generation doesn't have the attention span to get into a 30-episode series anymore, but the old curmudgeon-y part of me kind of questions it sometimes. But I also feel like this series was so beautifully animated, and it was so, like, in-your-face, raw, all at once, that it kind of just demands your attention, and it demands to be watched. That's kind of what the best aspect about this series is. It kind of demands that you watch it. Is it the best at its craft? I don't think so. I think that there are series that do the tropes that this series goes in a much better way. But I appreciate how important it is for a story like this to talk about generational trauma, because generational trauma needs to be brought up. A lot of us, myself included, have been products of it. We're trying to stop the cycle and discontinue the cycle. I like the message the story has of one way to stop the cycle is to talk to one another. Do I think it could have been expanded upon? Well, yeah. You could have done so much with this. I feel like the mangaka just didn't want to. And they were just like, I'm going to put these themes out there. You all do what you want with them. I'm not going to get too deep and too expanding into it. We're just going to put it out there. But yeah, no, you could do a lot with that. I feel like the story itself, this episode felt like the mangaka had the ending themes in mind. And they were like, all right, time to wrap it up and move on and end the story. Because like the concept of the fact that what would have solved everything was them talking to one another. Like, we all as the audience watching, we talked about this back in episode 1. We talked about this back in episode 2. I was like, that stuff has been, the audience knows about that concept. We've been waiting for that to be put into effect. And that's the solution by the mangaka standard, which is great. I think it's important. It needs to be said. It needs to be talked about. I would have loved to have seen a little bit more about Shizuka and Marina. I get why they did the thing that they did where we cut to the 5 years later in 2022 at the end. I think that's effective. There was just, it left me wanting more, but not because I was satisfied. Does that make sense? Sometimes you watch a series and you end up being satisfied and you're like, oh, I would watch a whole nother series of that because it was so good and I want to see more and I'm greedy and I want more of that series. I want more of it. But you feel satisfied. You're like, well, that was enough. That I got my fill, but I really am kind of greedy and I want a little bit more. And then there are other series that you watch where you're like, ooh, I want you to do more and I want to see more of it because I want to see you expand on these cool ideas that you've brought up that are really good. I want to see more of it. And that's kind of what this series does for me. It brings up some really good ideas in this episode, but it all feels really rushed and it feels like it's like begging you for tears. It's begging you to feel this emotional moment when I don't know in my mind if it's earned it. And that's why I didn't get all teary-eyed and stuff because I was like, oh, okay. That's how we end. Cool. Nice. Am I happy I watched the series? Yes. Yeah. I enjoyed this series a lot. I feel like this is one of those unfortunate things for me where people had hyped up this series so much. Like it was like a 10 out of 10, a 9.9 out of 10. It's the most highly rated series in the world. And I don't know if time will tell if people will still think back on this. Like a year from now, I don't know if people will think back on this and feel the same way about it. I don't know. I feel like it's easy to give this a 10 out of 10 because it's only 6 episodes and it doesn't have time to kind of run into those problems. If it's all like, if it feels like a torch, it burns out really quickly. It burns out instead of fades away. And I feel like that happens with some series. They fade away over time. They, lose that reception. But I'm very glad that I watched this series. I think hype got me expecting so much more. And then when I was in the first 3 episodes, I was like, oh yeah, this is meeting up the hype 100%. But it's hard to stick a landing. It's hard to stick a landing. It just isn't any series. It's hard to stick a landing. There's only been like one manga series I've read that I was like, oh, perfect ending. Mm-hmm. So far. We'll see. But I really liked this series. I'm glad I watched it. I really would have been anticipating it if I hadn't seen it. But I'm going to be honest with y'all. Romania needs a little bit of a mental break before we get into the series that's going to be starting on this time slot probably next year. So the rest of this month, I've got some extras that are going to be on Wednesdays that you all are going to watch. And then the month of December 2025 will be extras on Wednesdays. I have a lot planned, so don't worry. There will be a lot going on Wednesdays. But I want to be clear. I enjoy this series a lot. I found it of value. I thought the characters were Shizuka was my only character that I was like, with. I think Azuma and Marina were so well developed. I thought they were very fully fleshed out characters. You got their motivation. You got their characterization. You got their backstory. Shizuka's kind of like, the best way I can describe her, and people are going to like immediately do this when I say this, she's kind of like Guts from Berserk. She's developed, you get her point of view, you understand her perspective, but she is somewhat kept vague enough for the audience because we project a lot onto her as a character. We project a lot of ourselves onto Shizuka, kind of like we do with Guts and Berserk. They're developed characters, but they're kept a little simple in their character work because they kind of want to be audience surrogates at times. And that's fine, and that's fair, and that's well done. I liked that. But yeah, this was a good series. I enjoyed it. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. That's pretty high, isn't it? Yeah, give it a 9 out of 10. Is it perfect? No. Is it my favorite of this year? No. But it is good, and it is gorgeous, and I loved it. I'll talk about it more of where it stacks up in the end of the year top rundown for the series. But I also want to say, too, I hope that people do not take it out of context. I'm not saying this is just a show for young people and that older people won't value it, because I know a lot of people will. Somebody in the comments will be like, I'm 45 and thought this series was the most fire thing ever. And I'll be like, don't use the word fire. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. But I think for me, though, I felt like I couldn't maybe relate to this series as well as I would have if I was younger. I think if I was younger and coming off of those emotions from childhood a little bit more closely, I think this series would have identified with me a little bit better. But I think from the perspective of where I'm at now, I was not the target audience. Even though I've gone through a lot of what these characters have gone through, and I can relate a lot to that, and I felt the power of that. Hopefully that all makes sense, and you all know that I'm not trying to be condescending or mean to anybody. I'm sure there's people in their 50s that love this series, in their 70s, and that's valid. So I enjoyed it. I'm glad I watched it. And that's that. So yeah. Somebody in the Discord talked about possibly having a mini live stream to talk about this series. I do want to do a live stream over my winter break in the end of December, and I definitely want to like pencil in a slot for Takopi's Original Sin to talk about that series. I want to pencil in a slot to talk about Takopi's Original Sin. I'm gonna have like a slated time of when we're gonna talk about each series in the live stream, and just do like a live stream for half a day and just be like, hey guys, come in, let's talk about this at this time, and then just have like 30 minutes to hash it out about Takopi's Original Sin and go from there. But anyway, so I hope you all enjoyed this reaction discussion. I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below now that we've reached the end and we know what all happens, because there's no manga to worry about. It's also refreshing for the first time in a long time to be like, okay, that's the series. Done. I can check it off and be like, I'm done with it. Yay. So good times. But anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back very soon, y'all, with more reactions.